In this video, we explore what sounds better, CD, vinyl LP, or streaming. Please like and subscribe if you find this video helpful. You know how it goes with us YouTubers. We live for the human connection. Just a second to hit that like button. Thanks. In this video, the lifelong question, the question that's debated back and forth among audiophiles. And in my last video, I talked about some of my combating high record prices. But when you do want the best sound you can possibly get from your system, this is the question. What is best, right? What should you invest in order to get that great sound in your living space? And yeah, while it's no secret that I'm partial to vinyl, there's still people that'll be like, okay, then why did it go away? Right? If it's so great from an audiophile standpoint, why did it have its exit? In my opinion, this has a lot to do with marketing, all right? First of all, CDs were the new thing. They're called compact discs for a reason. They're a lot smaller, right? You can take them with you in your car. So that was a solution to, maybe recording your... It's like I used to record these onto cassette tapes, and then I just started buying cassette tapes because I drove a lot. I like to be on the move. I want to listen to something in my car. CD players in cars were a thing. That's a big part of it. But from an audio sound standpoint, there's albums that didn't sound great at the time they were recorded in the studios. Mike over there at the In Groove in Phoenix talked about Pink Floyd's Animals, how many different versions of that record he has and which ones didn't sound very great. The US vinyl version of that album sounded kind of noisy. Now when it was burnt to CDs and put on CDs, getting back in and remastering some of these things can make them sound better. That's one example. But there's also vinyl records that sounded amazing from back in the day, like way back in the day. They've not been touched by digital, fingertips. For example, this is from Speaker's Corner. We got this while we were in Phoenix at Mike's store. But Speaker's Corner records made from original analog master tapes. Only the best mastering studios worldwide. Pure analog. These weren't ever digital. This record was released in 1962. This record was expensive, right? But it sounds amazing. Like 1962 technology sounds crazy good. Was it all about sound? Vinyl making a comeback. A big part of it is the artwork, and I talked about that in my video on, reasons for vinyl's comeback. Again, 12 by 12 piece of artwork. Not just that, but you get the fold outs with Led Zeppelin 2 here. The record itself, there's a ritual to dropping the needle or stylus on the record as you listen to it. But in this video, I want to focus on just the sound. Analog recordings, and I know I'm not the first one to say this, a lot of people talk about it. It is not digital. In other words, it is a cut into this piece of wax, so to speak, the nickname. And there's nothing digital about it. It is recorded and cut the way it was mixed and mastered by the studio. It's going to sound much like it sounded in the studio. These recordings, they were harder to mess with on an analog, but you could still, they tweaked them much like they do today, but not as much as they do today. But the major thing to remember with vinyl is you're not getting a digital sound. Now, what do we mean by digital sound? And you've heard this said before, that it is pixelated, all right? But how pixelated is it, you may ask? Now, with CD, CDs came out. James Russell was credited with inventing the compact disc, the CD. This was an optical way of creating and pulling data. Little did the recording industry know what they were, what kind of things they were getting into when they made sound a digital file, but that's a whole nother video. Not to digress. The compact disc, 1980, started to hit the market in Japan. By 1982, Sony had the first compact disc player that was, you could buy in a store, and it was expensive. And if you ever see one, I believe it's a SPD 101. It's off my memory, but those are some really sought after CD players. Those were some of the first CD players to hit the market here in the United States. And the world changed. I think a lot of it had to do with marketing, because the record companies could produce these things really way cheaper and faster than they could create a vinyl record. Sony and Philips had this Red Book standard for digital sound and how it was put on this 120 millimeter piece of media, all right? This is early engineering, and I want to get too technical into the Nyquist theorem and how that hits the human ear, and sampling technology. Basically, sampling technology, speaking of bits and bytes and pixels, sampling is how you cut this thing up into little pieces and make it, the frequencies and everything, they digitally manifested something that was clear and palatable. But because of this technology that, let's be honest, most people don't and didn't understand at the time. They just thought, wow, this is really cool. These silver discs and these really expensive players for the things. It must be way superior to this wax piece of dinosaur, the scales that they had on their back or whatever. I don't know how people think of this stuff. All I know is that digital music is very technical, and while it made them a lot of money in the 80s and early 90s, it almost crushed them in the early 2000s. I'm not laughing about it. It just, again, digital music changed the world. For fun, we'll do some side-by-side versus comparison. And yes, I realize you're listening to the digital streaming through YouTube. Anyway, but this is my CD player right here. The speakers are turned all the way off. That's the volume is all the way down. You're hearing both of these mediums on the same system. So, for what it's worth, here you go. Versus a sample of vinyl. Led Zeppelin from 1969, Led Zeppelin 2, to the digital age. And what happened? But in its early days, before it became shareable, it caught on really fast. From 1982, the first, sound home units were sold. Mid to late 80s, and by the 90s, people just stopped buying vinyl as much. It's hard to find copies of the records that you like on vinyl from, the mid 90s, early 90s maybe, but after 93, CDs were king all the way up and, through the 2000s until about 2015 when they started beating out CDs. Vinyl did. How these are recorded is digitally. So kilobits per second. Now, with a vinyl record, you're hearing that cut, like that thing is cut into that piece without any interruptions. This is 100-year-old technology, by the way, and it's gotten better all the way up into the 80s, 90s, you know, like super vinyl, right? I could go off on an audio. It was very much based on digital film. So the technology that built the WAV file that CDs are recorded onto, it has bit rates much like you would have in film. So in film, even analog film, right, you're having frames per second. In audio, you're having bits per second. And 1,114 bits per second is a lot. Now, getting into streaming, how is that different than an MP3? Now, MP3s, which is a streaming technology, the reason it's a streaming technology is you can listen to an MP3 without having the whole thing downloaded, right? Like it can stream much like the radio does. That's how Spotify came to be. And some of these streaming services is they pay artists based on plays, much like they do on the radio. The digital bit rate of an MP3. MP3's little history of MP3s, they've been around since the mid-90s. They were finally patented, I believe it was in the UK, 1997. And, you know, by the early 2000s, they had turned the recording industry upside down with a thing called Napster. Why is that? Because an MP3 is really, it's a smaller, way smaller file, and it's a lot easier to share. And at 320 bits per second, they sound pretty good. They sound at the most pristine FM radio signal that you can get is what you're going to get out of an MP3. The radio, I still listen to the radio on occasion. Today, Spotify, which is starting to compete with the radio, right? You're going to get 160 kilobits per second if you listen to ads and you're not paying for premium, all right? They use an OGG technology, streaming technology, much like MP3s, MP4s. If you have Spotify Premium, you will get 360 kilobits per second. That's what you're paying for the extra sound quality with Spotify, which is interesting. I guess it's because of bandwidth and internet traffic. And it depends on your internet connection as well. And sometimes you can hear that, you know, you start a song and it sounds a little scratchy at the beginning and then it kind of gets clearer as your internet connection ramps up. It's a compressed technology. So just because you have an MP3 at 320 bits per second and you have a WAV file at 1,114 bits per second, what sounds better? Well, the WAV file is going to sound better, not necessarily because of the bits per second, because again, we have a compression going on. Okay, but how does it sound, Russ? How does it sound? I mean, it sounds pretty good, and I am paying for premium Spotify with the 320 kilobits per second. All right, we just got done listening to Lunatic Fringe on streaming and vinyl. Which sounded better?
Vinyl.
Vinyl sounded better. Why? Why do you think it sounded better?
It seemed more calming.
More calming. For me, it seemed more full. Like it filled the room with sound more, where, yeah, it was the lower bit rate, I think, on MP3 through streaming, even with our fast internet connection here, was still kind of almost scratchy in a way for me, where it's more warm. Vinyl is more of a warm sound, I think. And now 21 Pilots Vessel. Alright, so we just heard Car Radio by 21 Pilots on streaming and vinyl. There's the album right there. So you're 26, I'm 53, so this is no old guy bias. So listen to the vinyl versus the 320 kilobits per second Spotify, which one did you think sounded better?
Vinyl.
Vinyl
A
sounded
lot
better,
more full, a lot more clear.
right?
Sounded a lot better.
A lot richer sound. So there you have it. We put them up against. What did you think, love?
I like the vinyl too.
You always we're old people.
We talked about that last night.
We did. Thanks, son, for being on the video.
Yeah.
And hey, like and subscribe. You know, we always say it. You might as well do it or don't. We don't care. We do. So, thanks for watching. Till next time. Bye. Vessel. With Gunnar barking in the background. Yeah. Don't we love?
Mm-hmm.
She's like, uh-huh. Yep.